Some of you might know, this is early days for this standard. It was published just a couple of weeks ago. So right now we have a lot of organizations worldwide looking at it and trying to figure out how are we going to use it and so on and so forth. So in this seminar, we will actually walk you through some of the main contents of the standard and discuss some of the benefits that you might get out of using it. So the title is Innovation Management for Success, and as a matter of fact, this standard comes in a very right moment for the discipline, because we do need to as we move forward to innovate more than ever before. And this standard will be able to help you or any organization out there to do this in a more systematic way, in a more effective way, if it's done right. So let's discuss more about how you think it can be used after the presentation. In the next couple of minutes, I'm trying to cover the following things. I'm going to start to give a little bit of a context. What are the challenges we are facing within the discipline, where this standard now is kind of entering the scene, and some of the solutions, the standards, the profession, and so on, that is then addressing these challenges, and then moving on to really more detailed around what is the content of the standards. I'm going to quickly explain the innovation management principles and so on. Next, moving on to talking about the benefits of adopting the standard, and finally give some practical advice. Okay, what's the next step? What can you do to move on? And I'm going to share some of the resources we have developed at Amplify that can help you to take the next step and actually dig deeper into the subject of ISO 56001. So without further ado, I'd like to just move in and just briefly say something about Amplify. We are a niche consulting firm focusing solely on innovation management, and we've managed to stay at the forefront globally of this discipline for more than 20 years at this point. So we've been working with companies in Sweden and internationally for that period of time. So we have extensive, let's say, experience from practicing innovation management in all types of organizations: private, public, large, small, and so on and so forth. We've also been leading the standardization efforts. We've been expert, and as Michael pointed out in the introduction, I have been part of the standardization effort. Actually, it has now been 15 years. So we've been doing this for quite some time. We've been deeply involved in the writing of these standards. And finally, as also mentioned, there is a research component to this. We are doing research with the Royal Institute of Technology, but also universities all across the world, where we look specifically into the success factors of innovation management, and even more specifically, what we can call the systems approach to innovation management, which is actually more or less a new research field, as it is a new field in practice and in standardization. And we're going to share some of those insights with you here during this seminar. Let me just start by talking about some of the challenges that we are facing within the discipline at this point. First of all, there is no doubt about the need to innovate. The innovation imperative is everywhere, and it is relevant for any organizations, large, small, public, private, and so on. User expectations are increasing. New technologies are continuously advancing. There are still economic growth ambitions everywhere, at every level, organizations at national levels. And there are pressures to deal with things like operational efficiency and the transformations that we see in digital, in green, around the climate, and so on and so forth. So we need to innovate more than ever in a lot of areas, and no organization can really escape this innovation imperative. At the same time, we're seeing that some organizations, or even most organizations, are struggling with their innovation initiatives. This is a study that came out a few years ago, and it's very often cited. But we see studies of this kind again and again and again, and the results are the same. Innovation is way up there for organizations when it comes to put innovation on the agenda. It's extremely important for most organizations to innovate. It's top 3 typically on top management's agenda. But at the same time, and that's a disturbing figure here, most organizations are dissatisfied with their innovation performance. There is this feeling that they could get more results from the investments that they are making. So now is the time to start to think about what is it that we can do apart from what we're doing already that can actually increase the productivity or the effectiveness and efficiency, if you will, of our innovation efforts. And that's where we see these standards would fit in. Now, why is the reason why we see this great figure or great number of dissatisfaction out there? And there are a number of reasons. Here is just a few of them. The first one is around the perseverance. We see very often that these innovation efforts are fairly short-lived and episodic. They come and go. So an innovation activity is starting up within the organization. After a while, resources are pulled from that initiative and it fades away, and soon again after it restarts and it comes back. So it's kind of that start and stop situation. Typically, these cycles are around 3 to 4 years, and then it's being stopped, and then it starts again. And that, well, that is obvious. That is not a good thing to sustain the capability over time if you start and stop all the time. The second one is around a number of fragmented efforts, and most organizations are trying out things like design thinking or open innovation or hackathons and so on and so forth. So there are a number of great activities going on in many organizations, but very seldom are they connected together and put or viewed in terms of a system. And then I talk about a management system. How does it all fit together? How does it fit together with the leadership, the culture, and so on and so forth? So that holistic view is very often lacking in organizations. And finally, since we're talking about innovation, there's a lack of experience actually how to run innovation efforts. Innovation means that you're venturing into the unknown, you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and with that comes also a lot of risk. And many leaders, many managers are uncomfortable to deal with large amounts of risk. So they are making the safe choices. So you're staying the course and are not really comfortable in venturing out into that uncertainty or unknown space, which we need to do if we're going to innovate, in particular if we're going to innovate in a significant way. So there is this lack of experience. However, to deal with these particular situations, we see a couple of solutions that are now emerging, and I'm just going to talk about 2 of them. The first one is the emergence of international standards. And obviously, the topic of today is ISO 56001, which is one of those standards that would help us to get some kind of a roadmap or a framework to actually take this to the next level. The second part, or the second trend that we see that innovation management is an emerging profession. We see things like innovation management professionals. They have different names in different organizations, but these are professionals that knows about how to manage innovation activities and can create the best conditions for innovation to flourish within the organization. So the emerging profession connected with the international standards that we now see emerge on the scene will actually help us to effectively address most of these challenges that we have been talking about. But let me just walk through these one by one. We start to look into the international standards. The first reaction you get from people when they hear standards in innovation is that, okay, that doesn't really go together, because we want the innovation to be free and open. It's about creativity and so on. And as soon as you try to standardize that, you will actually put constraints on the innovation activities. And that reaction is fully understandable. However, that is not what these standards are doing. They are designed instead to pinpoint what is it that we need to put in place in organization to create the conditions for innovation to happen. And as a matter of fact, we know both from research and practice quite a lot about what are these enabling factors that needs to be in place to create good conditions. And again, to be honest, in most organizations, they have a kind of internally a lot of barriers to innovation. As innovators, we feel this. There is a struggle very often to innovate because we do not get all the way to get our innovations out into the market because there are barriers within organizations. Not because of, for malicious reasons, but rather organizations are not designed to renew themselves again and again. They are designed to deliver with precision, with quality and scale, the offerings that we do have in the organization. That means that there are barriers for innovation for good reasons, but we need these standards to be able to point those out and so that we can effectively remove them when we need to innovate. So there you have it. The standards is actually something that can help you to create those conditions and remove the barriers for innovation to happen. So it's all about creating the environment for innovation within the organization. Another interesting feature, and what's really new about this collection of documents, is that it's based on open international collaboration. ISO standards is a different public type of publication than any book, and we see a lot of those management books are published on innovation every week. This is a different publication. It is based on collaboration, and in this case, we've been around experts from around 50 countries that has been involved in this endeavor, and that means that it's a consensus-based product. So we've gathered perspectives from hundreds of experts and codified that knowledge into these standards. And that means we've kind of gathered the success factors both from research and from practice and put that into the form of a management system. And that is completely new. That has not been done before. So ISO 56001 is the first international standard in the world that does these things. And also, it's not that these experts invented the content from scratch. It's all about collecting what we already know about innovation and the success factors for innovation to take place based on research and practice. So if we just take a look at, there's a large family of standards, but I'd like just to highlight a few of them. And if we start to look at the first one, the ISO 56000, which is the foundational document of this family, it includes the fundamentals, the definitions, the terms that we need in innovation, and also the innovation management principles. So that's really the starting point. And the advice would be that take a look at that to learn some of the, let's say, the fundamental prerequisites for the innovation management system. They can all be found in this document, ISO 56000. And I'm going to give you a few highlights from the definitions and from the principles in just a moment. The middle part here, there are two standards that are kind of capturing the innovation management system. And this is really what's new and the key piece of this entire work that has been done within ISO. The first one, ISO 56001, is what we call the requirement standard. It includes requirements that you can evaluate conformity based on those requirements. ISO 56002 is a guidance standard, and that has been published a few years ago, 2019 actually. So that has been around, and a number of companies have started to use that and to deploy ISO 56002 already. But to be honest, it's not until we had now the number one document that we can actually start deploying an innovation management system on a larger scale in organizations. Finally, there is a document called Innovation Management Capabilities Assessment, This is an important document. This is produced by us from the Swedish perspective. It's actually provided by the Swedish Institute for Standards, and it's a handbook for how to assess each of the components of the innovation management system, so that you can understand, how do I measure up in my organization? What is my level of maturity? And there's a lot of curiosity out there, even if you're not looking to get certified or something like that. A lot of organizations want just to do the check, the assessment, to see, how do we measure up? Is it something we have missed? Is it something that we maybe should focus on improving or strengthening, and so on? That's how we use the document IMCA 2019. That is, however, being updated so that it's fully consistent with ISO 56001. I'm going to share some of those activities that is ongoing at the end of the presentation. Now, some of you might have been familiar with ISO 56002, and those two documents are very similar. So if we just compare the two documents, there's one major difference, and that is that ISO 56001 contains requirements. So there are statements that are expressed as requirements. So you can then evaluate whether you conform to that requirement or not. While in ISO 56002, there are guidance, recommendations rather, and a little bit more help and support and so on how to put these different elements in place. And that is the major difference. And you can see there are a few other more technical details. Some content has been moved from one class to another and so on. But in essence, the content and the kind of the spirit of these two documents are exactly the same. So those two documents covering an innovation management system. But as I mentioned, it's 56001 that is the game changer. It will be or any organization will be able to build capabilities using this document. They can also demonstrate conformity if they want to, become certified by an independent certification body, and also get an ISO certificate, very similar to the certificate you can get, for example, if you can conform to ISO 9001 for quality management system. The standard could also be used, for example, as a prerequisite to receive government funding, be part of innovation procurement, even R&D tax credits, and so on. So for the first time, we do have a document that could actually verify that in your organization, you have made an effort to put in place all the success factors for innovation to happen in a systematic and an effective way. And that could be attractive for funding bodies and procurement agencies and so on. This is what we foresee could happen when this standard is now being published. And in that way, this is a completely new situation that we have not had before within the discipline of innovation management. Let me just cover a little bit on the second pillar, the emerging profession. It's all good that we have international standards that talk about the capabilities in organizations and so on, but these capabilities are built by people, and that's where we see the emerging profession. We can call them innovation management professionals. And if we look at other disciplines or other professions that has been, professionalized or evolved over time, here are just two examples around project management professionals and quality management professionals. Those two categories and professions are more well-known to organizations, and companies know what to expect if you hire a project manager, for example. Not quite so when we talk about innovation management. It's still a little bit unclear what is an innovation management professional, what do they do, what do I need to know if I want to become one, and so on. Well, we do see that kind of curve of maturity is happening right now, and there are a few elements that are being put in place in terms of the professional model. For example, the job description. What am I expect to do as an innovation management professional? What is the competencies I need to acquire, depending on the level I'm working at, and so on? That's a competency framework actually being developed as we speak by ISO, so that we will have a baseline for that competency framework. soon. There is a body of knowledge. It's part of this model that shows, if I want to study and become an innovation management professional, that's what I like to read up on so that I understand the core or the fundamentals of the discipline. And finally, personal certification that can be attractive to individuals so that they could demonstrate their competencies, their capabilities, and it will help to strengthen the profession. It will establish a job market, and it increases the employability for the individual. And if you're going to hire such a professional, you know that they know how to do the job. So we do see that personal certification in the space of innovation management is emerging. And the world's first third-party personal certification in this space is provided by the Swedish organization RISE, the Research Institutes of Sweden, and their certification arm. And we've been doing this in Sweden for a number of years now, and it's spreading also to other markets. We can talk more about that if that is interesting to know more about. But we actually see that the emergence of these professionals is an integrated part and actually a must-have part in order to make the standards effective when you're trying to implement an innovation management system. Let me spend a little bit of time just walking through some of the content. And I'd like to do that in 3 areas, starting off with the definition, moving on to the principles, and finally the system itself. Obviously, if we're talking about innovation management and in that fundamentals part, the first document I talked about, we need a definition of innovation, and we spend a lot of time on that. We actually landed and concluded on a very simple and also very open and broad definition of innovation. Simply 2 characteristics. To qualify, to be called an innovation, it has to be new and it has to produce value. It has to be valuable in one way or another. But apart from that, it could be anything. It could be a new product, a new service, a new process, a new model, a new method, a new way to lead, a new way to organize, and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, according to the definition we provided within ISO, anything can be innovated. And that's kind of liberating to think that we could actually renew and create value on a very broad spectrum of entities. It's not only about high tech, it's not only about products and so on, but it actually pays off to look at that entire spectrum of where we can innovate. And here's the actual definition that's in the document. An innovation is a new or changed entity realizing or redistributing value. So there is this element of newness, there is the element of value, and then there is the entity that can be basically anything, just fill in anything instead of the entity. One interesting thing with this definition is the notion of redistributing value. And we know that any significant innovation not only creates a lot of value, it actually takes away value from what previously existed. So we have value moving from one place, for example, throughout a value network or a value chain when we are innovating. So there is this little dark side of innovation where you actually extract and remove value from what was previously there. So that's an interesting aspect of this particular definition. I could talk at length about this and why it looks like it does, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to pick them up after the presentation. So moving on from the definition of innovation to the innovation management principles. That was the second thing we did when we developed the management system, that we asked ourselves, what are the principles that needs to permeate through this system, that needs to underpin the system? And we started out with a lot of principles. As I said, we had people from 50 countries joining us, and there's a lot of perspectives on what is important when you are going to manage innovation activities. So we started out around 50 principles. We boiled it down to 8 innovation management principles. And they have been around now for quite some time. And I'd like to stick my neck out and say that this is all we need. We need 8 principles. They are the foundation for the management system, and they are the only ones we need to be able to understand and define the discipline of innovation management. You can challenge me on that. You might think that there is another one that needs to be there, or that we can even take one away. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Let me just walk through quickly. I'll share with you what these are all about. The first one is the principle about value realization, and that really comes from the definition of innovation. You do not have an innovation until you have realized value, and it actually pays off to start to think about value very early in the innovation process. When you're looking at the opportunities, when you're looking at your ideas and so on, you need to ask yourselves, is this going to create some value? And for who is it going to create value, and so on? And value is not only monetary value. It could also be other types of value, a customer satisfaction, a great experience, or social value, and so on. That is not so easy every time to monetize. To find great value, very often you can do that by exploring and exploiting deep insights. For example, insights about user needs. If you uncover a deep needs of a user or a customer, that's where you want to innovate, because that's where you can see that there is a great value. Sometimes we talk about finding pain points and so on. And that's the work that needs to be done before you start to come up with all kinds of solutions. You need to understand the problem first. That's how you can pinpoint and find that value more easily. So exploiting insights is a key principle. When you're doing that, you will stumble upon a lot of uncertainties. So managing uncertainty is a key aspect of the entire discipline. You need to find ways to be able to create your own reality, your own data. You need to experiment, to validate your ideas, and so on. And when you do that, you create your own data in an environment that there were a lot of uncertainty. So managing uncertainty is kind of the principle that sits at the core of the discipline and really make this discipline to stand out. And that makes a challenge for the future-focused leaders, because they need to know how to deal with an environment that has a lot of uncertainty. One thing is, for example, as leaders, we're used to base decision on evidence, and that's for good reasons, and that's what we are taught in school and so on. However, when you're innovating, you must also learn to base your decisions on assumptions, because there is no facts, there is no evidence. You need to take decisions based on nothing, just an assumption. And that is a major shift. That means a lot for the way that we behave as leaders in an organization. And we call this future-focused leadership, and decision-making is a key part of that. A tool for these leaders is to provide the strategic direction, to point to the focus areas where we need to innovate. That is important because those focus areas also the areas in the organizations where we are ready to invest, because these are problems or challenge areas or opportunity areas that are important for us as an organization. So strategy will be a tool for those leaders to actually focus their resources and help also to define the areas where we are not innovating. So it sets expectation in the organization. And obviously this takes place in an environment where the organizational culture is really the key enabler for this to happen. If you don't have the right culture for innovation to happen, it will be very, very difficult, and you will, and innovation activities will be an uphill battle. As part of that culture is the ability to adapt. You need to be able to adapt your processes, your structures, maybe your incentive schemes, and so on, to fit, for example, a new business model. And unless you have that adaptability in your organization, you will not be able to capture, at least not the more radical innovations, the more significant innovations that many organizations are seeking. And finally, you need to take the more holistic approach and look at all the success factors for innovation management together and put them in a system. And that's exactly where the innovation management system comes in. And this is the third area that I'm just going to walk you through real quick. These are the headings of the document ISO 56001. And obviously, we cannot go into detail, but I will leave you with this visual where you can kind of take a look at, okay, these are the headings, and obviously underneath they're describing the different requirements that are part of each of these sections. Let me just guide you quickly through this visual. At the center, we have what we call kind of the innovation operational part. This is where the work takes place. This is the processes that you're using to innovate. And it kind of takes you from the left to the right. So it starts with an intention to innovate. Basically, you have nothing. And then you work through all these operational parts, the processes, and you end up on the right-hand side with value being created in one form or another. And that's where you have an innovation. So you go from nothing to an innovation in that kind of middle segment of the system. And if we just enlarge that part, it could look like this. And there is guidance within the standards on what are the key essential processes or process components that must be part of the journey from intent to value. The standard stipulates that you need to consider all these 5 generic process elements. And if you just run through them really quickly, it starts about identifying the opportunities. That could be, identifying a user need, for example, or a customer problem. That's the first one. You move into the next one, you create concepts. That's where you generate ideas. You cluster them into concepts and so on. That will actually address that opportunity that you saw in the first part. Then, since we have a lot of uncertainty, we need to validate. And the rule is to validate early and to run experiments, testing, and so on as early and as cheaply as possible, so that you can elaborate those concepts before you move on to develop the solutions and finally to deploy the solutions and then capture value in the end. So these different parts are described within the innovation management system, but they could be configured in many different ways, and they could be broken down into more steps or consolidated into fewer steps and so on. That's not the point in the standard. It just points out that we need to consider that these activities are covered within the processes that you choose to have within your organization. And it's not as linear as it looks here. This is very much an iterative process. So you're jumping back and forth. When you have validated the concept, maybe you have to go back and look at the opportunity again, dig deeper into the problem. You learn more about that before you generate new concepts and then you validate again. So there's a lot of looping and iterations going on here. For that centerpiece to work, there's a lot of support, and there is a clause on support in the standards talking about things like funding, people, competence, communication, and so on and so forth. More like a checklist of things that needs to be in place for that operational segment to work as smoothly as possible. And the whole thing takes place within a context where you actually start to work to understand what are the trends, where are our customers going, what happens with competitors, what are the requirements that is being put on us by regulators and so on. To understanding that context is really the impetus to the leadership piece, where we discuss things like strategy, the policy, the culture we need within the organization, and also the role of top management. That's all found in the leadership clause. And when the leadership has done their thing around setting those priorities, it's a lot of planning around setting up the more operational objectives, things like the portfolio, collaboration frameworks, and so on, that needs to be put in place for those operational activities to work. And finally, when you're done setting up all these other elements, you need to take a step back and evaluate the entire innovation management system, because it includes a lot of factors, and there is always a bottleneck. There is always some area that can be improved. So you need to identify that through the evaluation, and then you do the improvement. So the innovation management system is a living thing. It's never done complete, and then we can forget about it. It's something that we constantly return to, and we know that innovation is, moving in all kinds of directions, and we must secure that the system is fit to deal with the innovations that we would like to pursue. So that is a constant thing, and that is built into the system. One interesting thing is that the innovation management system is based on the same harmonized structure as any other management system by ISO. Most famous ISO 9001 for quality, 14001 for the environment. They are structurally the same. So it plugs right into those other standards so that you can produce an integrated management system. So we're not created like an alien here that doesn't fit into the organization. It should be part of the management system that the organization already has. Just a few notes related to quality management and the relationship between that and innovation management. As you can see, these are two areas that has an overlap in the middle. They're both needed. They both create value for organizations, but they are also different. And the differences need to be acknowledged. In quality management, we are looking very much to here and now, what we offer today to today's customers, and we continuously improve those offerings under conditions of lower uncertainty. We have measurability and predictability in the quality world. In innovation management, we don't have that. There we deal with renewal and transformation under conditions of higher uncertainty. So that's very much the space of exploration, discovery, and so on and so forth. And that's also the difference in decision-making that I talked about just a moment ago. And we can actually see, if we look at any organization, that the bare minimum in terms of management systems any organization would need is actually twofold. And we can use this, the metaphor of the double-decker bus. So if any organization is that double-decker bus, we need at the lower deck, we need the system for managing operations. That's what we do every day in organizations. We deliver stuff to clients, to citizens, and so on. And we do that, again and again. And there is repeatability, predictability, quality, and so on. That's in the first system. That sits at the bottom, at the lower deck of the bus. And obviously, we need to navigate everything what's happening around us. Traffic, busy things, and so on. And we need to deal with that immediately as it occurs. So that is, the logic of that lower deck. In the upper deck, there's no steering wheel, but on the other hand, we can look further. And that is where we have the system for managing innovations. So we can then look at, further out into the future, what is happening at the horizon, what are the things we need to prepare for, and then bring them down to the lower deck. So the whole thing here, to have a sound or a living organization, is that we have a good relationship and good interaction between these two levels. The upper and the lower deck must not be separated. They need to be working be synchronized, but it might be very different logic and ways of working on those two levels. So let me just round it off mentioning a few of the benefits of having this framework. And the key benefit is really that we now have a common framework and a common language. So that goes for organizations that has many sites, many units, maybe in different countries, and so on and so forth. It might be collaboration with other organizations. If we can do this based on a common framework and a common language, a lot is gained. We can actually start at the higher level, and we do not have the confusion of trying to understand, what do you mean by innovation? What is an innovation management system from your perspective, and so on. So this really helps us to define both the discipline and the profession so that we could start at the higher level. This is the common denominator for organizations when they are going to innovate. Then obviously on top of that, there will be all kinds of things that differentiate them from each other and so on. But this, the standard ISO 56001, talks about what is the common core. And it's designed for all types of organizations and all types of innovations. So if we just summarize the benefits, it's about having a systems approach, looking at all the different factors, not just a few factors, but all of them. And that is hugely beneficial, because maybe your bottleneck right now when it comes to innovating is not where you think it is. It might be in one of these other factors. So you need to have that full spectrum. you can realize higher value faster and with a greater precision, because the standards will guide you to actually put the right conditions in place and remove the barriers so that you can more easily and faster realize value. It is the core and foundation of the transformations that we talked about initially: digital, green, energy, defense. There's a lot of transformations going on. There's a lot of work to be done in many areas, and innovation is at the core. These standards can help to do that work more effectively. Collaboration, I've already mentioned, a common language would greatly support collaboration. And finally, with an ISO standard, you enhance the legitimacy, you can boost reputation through certification, that you actually can demonstrate to your partners, your clients, and so on, that you actually have considered all of the factors that will help you to innovate even better and stronger. We did some research on this, collected a number of use cases. If you don't have time to capture the QR codes, we will share the slides with you afterwards, so you can take a look at this at your own pace. But as you can see, here is a number of companies, public organizations, and all over the world that have started to deploy this systems approach to innovation management. And we try to capture some of the learnings very early on that. So just want to let you know that there is some case studies out there, some research going on that is looking into, okay, what is the value if you deploy this particular perspective with the management system. Just very quickly, what can you do to get ready? Basically, this is very new. You need to start from scratch very often, and there is an awareness phase. So the first phase is really to start to create awareness about the standards exist and what is it about. So it's about understanding. So what is an innovation management system and why is it essential? And I'm going to share some resources right after this around that. After that, you need to move in to learn this a little bit deeper. It's a good idea to understand the different elements, just walk through the standards and dig a little bit deeper. How can you actually implement the different requirements? And that's competence development. That's the second step. So you're learning the fundamentals of systematic innovation management. And then you move on to the next step. That's when you start to maybe assess your current capabilities and start to implement the ones that you think are relevant to take you to the next stage. Could include certification, but it doesn't have to. Certification is not mandatory. If you find guidance and inspirations from these standards, that's good enough. You don't need to get certified. But they can definitely point you in a direction where a few capabilities could go a long way to improve your own innovation capabilities. Just a few resources that we have provided. This is a guidebook called Introducing ISO 56001. Again, we'll share these slides. You can capture these codes later on, and you can get a free copy. And this is just walking through the different parts. A little bit of what I've been talking about here today is actually written in this very short, simple guidebook. Moving on to the next stage, Amplify has also created a training program called Systematic Innovation Management. Could be done like a self-paced program. There are a number of modules in here that you can do by yourself, or you can do it in the team, or we can provide it with webinars attached to it and so on, so you can walk through it together with a larger group. It's also a knowledge resource, and it includes an AI assistant, and this is available for a full year. So it's more like a subscription that you have a resource at your fingertips anytime to be able to bring out the knowledge you need in that particular situation that you might be in. So these are the topics. If we just walk through quickly, it starts with definition, the principles, the system. A little bit, we scratched the surface here today, digging deeper into what are these innovation processes that we talked about? Why do we need to develop deep insights? What is the role of top management to make this work? Around strategies, how we adapt structures, and what about the leaders, the leadership? How are we going to think around leadership and around culture? How do we foster the right innovation culture? And then it ends up around talking about assessment, measurements, performance indicators, and so on. And then we trained an AI assistant on all this material, so that is also being part of the training package, that you can ask questions directly and get an answer from anything that's part of kind of this space of systematic innovation management. We just released a checklist. We call this the Innovation Management Checklist, based on ISO 56001. This is a concentrate. We've actually taken the full standard and boiled it down into 28 statements. So this checklist enables you just to walk through quickly the entire standard and rate, do we have it or don't we have it? So that you can get a quick understanding of where you stand in relation to ISO 56001. This is not very detailed, but on the other hand, it's fairly quick, it's easy to grasp, you can do it fairly quickly, and it will give you a very good feeling for what is this, what are the requirements in the standard anyway. Right now, we're developing the next level of assessment. It's not ready yet, but I'll just show that to you, and I'm happy to share that later on. So it'll take another 1 or 2 months or so. This will be the detailed assessment where we actually look at the maturity levels in the organization. So for each of these parameters of the standard, we will be able to kind of very carefully calibrate so that you can see exactly what is your current maturity level. And then you can decide and prioritize what is it that we need to work on. And maybe we're satisfied. Maybe we don't need to be perfect in all of these dimensions. But this will be the tool you use to get, that baseline for decision making. And there's a lot of other stuff that I would not cover now, but they will be available on innovationmanagementsystem.com, where we have continuously are publishing new stuff that we are doing. So by that, and it took a little bit longer than expected, I will hand over to Michael again and ready to answer any questions if there are any.
Well, Magnus, thank you. We do actually have some questions. Just watching time here, we have about 11 minutes. So let me get to those real quickly here. The first of which is, how do you ensure that the ISO 56001 standard remains adaptable to different industries and varying levels of innovation maturity?
That's an excellent question. As a matter of fact, when we were developing this, and that goes for any management system, there is a very careful consideration that we're not putting in things that is only valid for large companies or is very complicated to put in place for a small and medium-sized company, for example. And also that we use the language so it's relevant for public organizations that typically may not, be so interested in growth and profit and so on, but maybe for those social benefits. So we've actually taken great care of that, and all of the requirements are scalable. So you can scale it down. So even if it says that you need an innovation strategy, you can make a very simple innovation strategy. And we know, for example, even a very small company and a public organization, they do need, if not a complicated, but a very simple innovation strategy that will help them to prioritize. And that can be done, at the very, very simple level. If you're a large organization, obviously you must spend much more time and resources in creating your innovation strategy, and that is a much larger endeavor. So it scales from that back of a napkin strategy to something that is, take 6 months or a year to pull together for a very large organization, and that goes for all of the requirements. So so that scalability is actually in there. But you need to interpret the requirements carefully so that you really see that, okay, what is the minimal requirement I can do in order to fulfill this requirement? So that flexibility is built into the notion of a management system.
Excellent. One more for you. When is a good time / opportunity for an organization with KPIs like market size, company size, profitability, to go for such certification? Or is this meant to be a one-size-fits-all solution?
No, it is highly adaptable. And I think that maybe your first decision is not to go for certification. Your first decision is, let's assess our organization. And the checklist that I showed could be the very first step to do that. And that will create the baseline, some knowledge about what do we already have in place. And then you take a look at that, and maybe you're happy with that. You don't need certification, you don't need any more capabilities and so on, because it will only incur extra cost and so on. So you need to do that first, and then you decide, okay, given the situation that we have in our specific context, we need to do 1, 2, and 3. So you put your action plan together based on that assessment. And that is very individual. So it's not one size fits all. You need to decide and pick up the ones that will help you to take the next step. Certification or not, I mean, that would not really help you to innovate better. You should focus on putting the capabilities in place. Certification could be your receipt that you've actually done the job. It might be needed for you to get a contract. It might be needed for you to impress your partners and so on. It might be, you might be ahead of your competitors and so on. And you need to think about that. What kind of value could a certification bring to my organization? And that does not go for all of the organizations. So certification is a choice.
Great. Another question is, the cost of the certification is quite high for an individual. Are there any opportunities for grants / sponsorships with appropriate value exchange in place?
That is a very good question, and that's very much up to each market. We don't see that, but we foresee that there will be funding organizations that think of maybe this sector needs to be upgrade its innovation performance. So that funding organization might decide then to subsidize the certification process and so on. But that is not something that it's not part of what we are doing or what ISO is doing. It's very much up to authorities, funding organization in each region and market to do so. However, we see that there are signs that we might have support to do this, to do these projects from such agencies. And depending on where you are in the world, this would look different. So you have to check with the funding organizations in your context and make them aware that this is an opportunity for them maybe to sponsor, to trigger or to catalyze the uptake of these standards.
Excellent. Another question is, do you see a minimum team size required to implement the standard well? i.e., are there specific roles that you find are really essential to get the required momentum?
I think what is required and what's important is that you need eventually at one point get the buy-in from top management. So that is requirement. Apart from that, there are no requirement of roles and team size and so on. It's very much dependent on your situation. There is a section on roles and responsibilities. And if you're a small organization, obviously one person will be responsible for everything and do that job. If it's a larger organization, you might want to be more specific about who does what so that the innovation management system functions and works together. But there is no, let's say, normative size and say you need to have these roles or something like that. But you need to consider that you need enough of that responsibilities appointed so that the thing works as it should. But it's up to each organization actually to decide that.
Excellent. We have 4 minutes. I think we can get a couple more in here. Any suggestion on how to deploy this in an organization that has no background about this standard?
I think that should not be a problem. The steps I talked about, there is an awareness step and there is a learning step before you implement. So if you have no knowledge about these standards, just pay attention to those first steps. Let's get familiarized with the standard. Take the decision to move on to the learning stage. You might train a few people at least to get a little bit of a deeper understanding. Then based on that knowledge, you can take the decision. Should we go further or should we just skip it? This is not for us, because it might not be for every organization. But if you do that 1, 2, 3 steps, you could drop out at any point, and the investment is not so high if you do that step by step.
Great. One additional question here. Is it possible to certify a specific type of innovation process, e.g. open innovation, or should certification cover innovation in its entirety, i.e. any process leading to innovation?
That's a good question. If you have a specific process, it can be certified for that purpose. And there's always, when you start to look at the innovation management system, you set the scope and you decide the scope. The standard does not decide the scope. And you can set the scope that, for this innovation management system, we want to cover these processes, maybe these products or these services or this particular partnership and so on. So you decide the scope. But then you have to think about, is it appropriate maybe to, if you have the too narrow scope, you might miss some kind of, the trade-offs and the optimization opportunities in here. But it's possible to decide, you set the scope, basically. So that is not prescribed. It doesn't have to be everything and everyone.
Great. One additional question here. If top-down approach is required, like practically every change management system, then the missing piece is not just a readiness assessment, but a value ROI calculation system, no?
That's right. And I think that's part of any investment that is made in an organization, and particularly investments to innovate are tricky because there's a lot of uncertainty and so on. That's why we shy away from investing in innovation, because it's uncertain, right? But with an innovation management system, we get support. We have, for example, an innovation strategy will help you because you think through what is it worth investing in. So the concept of problems worth solving is very important here. Probably it's not worth solving any problem and pick up any idea in an organization. You have probably, in order to get that ROI calculation right, you need to decide on what is worth putting our resources behind. That's why you need some kind of buy-in from top management to figure that out. And that will channel the creativity of people generating ideas and so on what is important for your organization, and also increase the likelihood that those ideas actually will be acted upon, because it's part of something that we think is worth solving. And that's how you kind of get closer to that ROI calculation. But as we all know, in innovation, there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees. But we can dramatically increase the likelihood by putting those enablers in place.
Well, Magnus, thank you for the expertise and really an exceptional hour. We're out of time. So once again, thank you. And I thank everyone for joining the call today. And, thank you so much. And we'll be reaching out. And please do feel free to reach out to us if there's any additional information you need. And with that, we'll close the session. Thanks very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.